All right. Good evening, everybody. I am Chris. My call is KB2IDX, and welcome to the Digital Learning Net. I am in Bloomington, Indiana, and along with my good friend and co-net control, Bucky, W0SUN, we meet every Wednesday at this time, 1900 hours Mountain Time, right here on Colorado HD. We come and we talk about all kinds of good stuff to do with digital ham radio, interesting things that are happening, events, any news we might have. Sometimes products are released, nothing yet, but those are things we like to talk about. Problems, you name it, and we always listen to your comments, your questions, and we do appreciate it. So we like to do our check-ins online at ham.live, ham.live. You just put that into any browser, and if you have a Gmail email address, there's a button you can click on and follow those prompts. Once you're in the room, you're counted and you're logged in. If you have any other kind of email address, there's a box for you to put that address in there, and you hit that, and it will send you an email, and just follow the prompts. You reset. So as I mentioned, once you are in the room, it will automatically log you. So we also have ways that you can listen to the net if you don't have a license or you're away, just don't have the opportunity, but you still got internet. There's the Brandmeister hose line. And that is hose.brandmeister.network. And you're looking for Talk Crew 31088. And I will be posting those links here shortly into the chat room. We also have, if Matt is here, I believe we have our YouTube up. That would be kf0owb.net. Again, I'll put that link in as well. Also, most importantly, we have our own website, coloradodigital.net. Please make sure you check it out. Lots of good resources and info there, and it gets updated all the time. Anyway, that's what it is. You can also find a place there to make a donation, should you decide to. It does take money to keep the reflector up and running. There's a lot of modules going, and any contributions would be welcome. All right. At this point, is there anyone that has any announcements of interest to the group? Please come now with your call sign. This is KB2IDX. W0SUN. We should probably take some check-ins. That, sir, is what we're going to do. I'll tell you what. I'm going to read off who's in the chat room real quick, and then we'll do it over the air. And Let me reset and I'll get started on that. Okay, we have myself and Bucky, W0SUN, W1BKW, KQ1USA, NT6DX, K3FZT, KF0MYC, K0EB, KJ5EBU, KF0IGK, KF0OWB, N9DYO, KE0TTW, W5STC, W0KVZ, AC0XW, KE9BJL, KC8GEF, N7KIP, W7DCA, WD0CIV, VE4DBZ, N5YAI, ZL2BEZ, KB0LSM, KN4FM, K9KD9YOO, WX4C, KG2CV, W6CEP, K2AS, WD0HDR, KI7NTK. And that gives us 33. And lots of folks recognizable in there. I like it. When the regulars keep showing up, it's good. Okay. So, let me reset here real quick. Alright, if you're up there listening and you don't have the opportunity to check in via the internet, here's your opportunity. If you need to check in, please come now. This is KB2IDX from the Digital Learning Net.
KI5YNS.
Alrighty. Recognize KI5YNS. Also added in the chat room, Eric KE0SMR and KC9EOD. Anyone else out there would like to check in, please come now. Alrighty, nothing hurt. Okie doke. We're caught up, and I think we're going to go see what my friend Bucky has for us this evening. It's all yours, Bucky. W0SUN from KB2IDX.
All right, thanks, Chris. All right, man. All right, well, let's see. We got 38. Oh, that's awesome. If you're not in the chat room, you got to join us on ham.live. There's a lot of cool things going on. One thing I really love is, who put this in there? Let's see. Oh, yeah, you put it in there. KB2IDX. There's a ham radio operator action figure complete with DMR and fusion power. You got to see this. It's pretty cool. I just wanted to mention that. Come on and join us on ham.live, ham.live. And we just brought in Doug, N0DIS, and we brought in Gabe, KA5JKI. Awesome. All right. Let's see if there's any questions or comments. Any questions for the net? If you have any questions on Fusion, hotspots, WiresX, DMR, DStar, anything like that, please come now with your call sign. All right. Do you know of any action in the digital world, new announcements, anything with hotspots? One thing, if you haven't heard, I'm just going to mention this before I turn it over to Chris, and you can turn it right back to me if you'd like. So if you haven't heard, regarding the M1KE, remember that device that SharkRF put out? That mic, we call it the mic. It's a little communication device in the palm of your hand. It's not a radio per se. Some people call it a digital radio. I call it a little communication system in a nice little package that you can carry around. It doesn't require a hotspot, but it does require Wi-Fi or your cell phone. It needs to tether onto your cell phone with internet access so it can connect to Wi-Fi or whatever. But they just came out with a new firmware update that lets you do All-Star. And the way you can do that, a lot of people, they think, oh man, OpenSpot 4 Pro, they should come out with a firmware update so they can do All-Star. But they can't do that because they use an MMDVM type technology. They use a digital voice modem. And so it's for your radios that have an ambi chip coming in with an OpenSpot or a hotspot that uses digital voice modem. But the SharkRF mic device doesn't use a digital voice modem. You just talk in it and you choose the network. So it doesn't use that type of technology. So if an OpenSpot needed to do that, they'd have to come out with a new revision, like an OpenSpot 5. But it's pretty cool because this allows you to jump in the OpenSpot area, which uses voice over IP technology. So we talked about that update last week, but if you haven't heard, I think that's really cool. And it makes my mic device a lot more valuable to me. Let's see if Chris has anything over to KB2IDX. This is W0SUN.
Nothing major to report. WPSD continues to update and evolve. And sometimes they make mistakes, but they come back and fix them really quick. And that's what open source is all about. Looking forward to keeping an eye on them. The other thing was another hint, I think. We're talking about our friend John Cross and his Facebook post. Just this afternoon, Yaesu, the official Yaesu Facebook group, announced that he would be talking on his YouTube/podcast this week about the FTX 1F. So I got a feeling we're getting closer. Perhaps only a couple of weeks away, maybe. Maybe it's gotta get the sheet pulled off of it at Xenia. You never know. We'll see. But it's all speculation, no facts. They're leaving us alone. But that's all I got, Bucky. Back to you, sir. And I noticed you're posting some interesting images into our chat room. W0SUN from KB2IDX.
Yep, I'm just prepping for what I want to talk about tonight. If there are no questions, I do have some stuff I want to talk about, and I think this is very interesting. I want to talk about a little bit about the difference between all the modes out there. So you've got D-Star, DMR, Fusion, P25, NXDN, now M17. What else is there out there? But I've got some charts out there, and I want to just talk a little bit about where they all come from, where they fit, a little bit about when they started, and a little bit about that. So I'm going to start out with one of the first modes ever produced. Comes out of Japan, and everybody kind of knows what I'm talking about. This is really the first digital mode that I heard about, and this uses a technology called AMBI chip, and I'm going to talk about. Let's see if I can go to. I'll post a link here in just a second, but yeah. So there's three different divisions or three different modes that use digital voice vocoding, encoding. They do it before when you speak into your radio, they convert it and send a digital signal that you can't hear with an FM radio over the air with limited, it squeezes the bandwidth so it doesn't use as much bandwidth, and it arrives at another repeater or another radio or another hotspot or device that also takes that digital signal and passes it along. So I'm talking about D-Star, the big three, D-Star, DMR, and Fusion. But let me talk about these modes, and then I'm going to branch off into some other less known modes. So let's just, I'm finding some, okay, there we go, I found it. So I'm going to reset, so stand by. Okay, so I'm going to go pretty quick. I'm not going to go into much detail unless you want me to. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to go deeper. I've done a lot of research on this, but over time I've had nets on this before. I've really broken this down. I've gotten really deep in the past, and we're talking about 2 years ago, a year ago, whatever. So I've taken a lot of notes on this, but I'm going to talk about D-Star, which I think is the first digital mode that really became popular out of Japan using the AMBI chip. So D-Star started out in, believe it or not, 1998. And that's when it first started out as an idea, and it came from the Japanese Amateur Radio League. And finally, in 2001, D-Star was published as a result of all the research and talking about it from 1998. 2001 became a mode basically popular in Japan. So ICOM jumped on it in 2003, and D-Star started taking off in 2003 with ICOM embracing that technology. Now, it came to America about, let me reset and I'll tell you. Okay, I think I started hearing about D-Star in 2009 in the USA, but I think it was available in 2004, but it really took off in 2009. And I'm doing this a lot from memory, but there are other systems that use D-Star. Flex Radio embraced D-Star in 2015, believe it or not. They have D-Star support on HF, and there are other HF radios from ICOM that also does D-Star, so you can do it on mostly 10 meters. And why can't we do it on the other meters? I mean, we can do it on 40 meters. You can do it on 20 meters, but there is a limitation put out there, mostly in the USA, and they limit the baud rate on the different bands. So it's a matter of regulation. Mostly they provide an ability to do digital modes on 10 meters. That's pretty much it. That's where the modes become popular. But if you'd like, you can try it on the other modes. It'll probably work. But I really wondered why you don't do digital modes on the other bands. And it's a matter of bandwidth regulation and baud rate. So 10 meters and 6 meters is pretty much it. That's where it's popular. Not exactly popular, but it's starting to take off a little bit more. So you're going to hear D-Star nets on 10 meters. I don't know the frequency, but there is actually a net every Sunday morning. Let me make sure I don't time out. Okay, so I'm talking about the HF area because Flex Radio and ICOM come out with an HF. They came out with an HF radio, and ICOM has several HF radios that do D-Star. Let's see, where else do I want to go with this? So that's the reason why that they, you don't see more digital, at least with the type of digital. I mean, there are other digital modes out there, but voice digital from the big three, there's really not DMR on HF, but there is Fusion C4FM on 10 meters as well, 29.250. And I'll find out the D-Star frequency. But if you're interested, Sunday morning there's a net on REF 30 Charlie. There's a D-Star HF net, but they coordinated on REF 30 Charlie, which is a very popular reflector for D-Star. So if you want to tune into that net, go ahead and tune in on that reflector on Sunday mornings. All right, let me see what else I want to talk about. Okay, Kenwood also embraced D-Star. They came out supporting D-Star with their handy-talkie, the Kenwood TH-D74 radio. And I've got one of those radios, and it's my favorite D-Star radio. I also have another handy-talkie. I only have a single-band UHF radio. It's called the ICOM the D31, or I don't know, the 31. I suddenly forgot, but it's the 31 alpha, the 31 plus alpha. It'll remind me. I'll remind it the exact model number. But there's also the ICOM handy-talkies, the 50, the 51, the 52. There's some other mobile radios out there, but Kenwood came out with the D74, and then they discontinued it, but recently they came out with the D75, and they also just recently came out with a new mobile radio that also does D-Star. So that's a UHF, VHF. I think it's a triple band mobile radio. So I'll come out. I'm not really going to come out with a model number because I didn't really prepare that, but I'm just going to go over a little bit brief topic about D-Star. So that's D-Star. It's really took off 2009, and then 2016 it really started taking off. So I remember that. Even before the hotspot, D-Star was quite popular. And they had before the hotspot, they had a device that you could connect to your computer, and it's called the DVAP, a DVAP. So that device also came out before the hotspot. So we have to thank D-Star for all their pioneer work in coming out with a digital voice type of technology. Okay, as I mentioned, you can look at some of the diagrams I have on the different bandwidth comparisons and the different mode comparison. D-Star only uses 6.25 kilohertz. FM uses, right here you can look at this, they use 16 kilohertz for bandwidth. DMR and Fusion uses 12.5. D-Star 6.25, and that's all you get. So they use very narrow bandwidth. Technically, you can look at the charts for yourself. They use the same multiplex modulation system, the FDMA, as Fusion, which is a frequency keying method, frequency shift keying method that they both share with Fusion and D-Star. Although Fusion uses the full 12.5 kilohertz. So that's as much technical as I'm going to get. All right. Anybody have any questions on D-Star? Now, you guys are quiet. All right. So if you want to find more about the Ambi chip in general, so D-Star and they put a patent and a copyright on the Ambi chip, the first one that came out, the Ambi Plus chip, or I call it the Ambi 1. So that chip came out first. Let me talk about the second Ambi chip that came out, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, because that's going to be with the other modes. But I want to move on to the second protocol that you can use, and that's also produced by ICOM. That was a joint collaboration with ICOM and Kenwood. They came out with another protocol called NXDN. NXDN, let me talk about that. One thing I forgot to mention with D-Star is you don't need to register that with a radio ID, but you should these days. But what you needed to register was your call sign so you could get on the early type of reflectors called an REF reflector. So back in the day, you had to register your call sign with D-Star. And I'll put that link for registration in, but it's not radio ID. It's another registration system. So early on, yes, you had to register your call sign back in the day. All right, let's talk about NXDN. Okay, I had to take a little sip to continue. I want to talk about NXDN. NXDN started appearing, they started working on that, and I say they, Kenwood and ICOM in 2003. That was mostly used for communication by private land mobile radio. So they started getting, it really became popular in 2013 actually, but and then 2016 as well. So a lot of private companies used NXDN. Now, ham radio also uses NXDN, and you can buy the most popular NXDN radio is made by Kenwood. And if you go to Kenwood's webpage, you can go through the list of products and find several NXDN radios. And we actually used to have a NXDN repeater in Fort Collins, Colorado, but that has since been discontinued, unfortunately. But I know one guy that had an NXDN radio, and that was Bud W0RMT. He had a Kenwood NXDN radio. I don't know if he still has it, but I remember talking to him about NXDN, and I wish he was here because he could tell you a lot more about it, but that's okay. So when you want to use NXDN, what I do is I get on with one of the modes on Pi-Star, and then I do like I get on Fusion, and I get on my OpenSpot, and then I cross mode over to NXDN. But before you do that, you do need to register with Radio ID. Now here's the kicker. You have to have an additional Radio ID. If you have registered a DMR ID, that's not going to work on NXDN. And that's a really, that's not pretty common. So if you register with Radio ID with a DMR ID, you can use it on all the DMR networks out there. But if you want to get on NXDN, you got to go back to Radio ID and get an additional ID. Let me reset. So if you go to radioid.net and look up my call sign W0SUN, you're going to find that I have two IDs. I have one DMR ID and I have another NXDN ID. So can you get on XLX 303 with an NXDN ID? We don't have an NXDN module per se, but you can use module G, the Pi-Star chat. And I can tell you, you can come in on reflector 31672. And if you connect to that reflector with NXDN, you are going to be communicating on our XLX 303G. That's golf. So if you want to connect on XLX 303G and then have somebody else get on NXDN, you can communicate to each other. That's the best we have on XLX 303, and that's provided by XLX 672, provided by Andy himself, the guy that wrote Pi-Star. We've been connected to his reflector from way back. In fact, there was a shortage of Ambi chips, and he used our Ambi chips for a while until he was able to get his own. So we've had a collaboration with Andy from way back, and our two reflectors are tied to each other on module G, and over on his side on module E. So that's kind of cool. So yes, he has an NXDN connection, and it's tied into our XLX 303G. I think that's pretty cool. Okay, technically, NXDN, you can switch it back and forth between, now get this, you can use a wide 12.5 kilohertz channel, or you can switch it down to 6.25 kilohertz. So either 12.5 bandwidth or 6.25 bandwidth. And I think that's interesting. You can read more about it. It uses FDMA. Most of the modes use frequency shift FDMA. And yeah, I think that's very interesting. So it's very similar kind of a modulation system in that it uses that modulation frequency shift. Now, I'm going to talk about the two differences is some radios use a time division, which is time slot 1 and time slot 2, where other ones use an FDMA. And I'll talk about that here in a little bit. All right, any questions so far? Okay, we've got 44 check-ins. Let me pass it over to Chris, and you can get us up to speed just to take a little bit of a transition before I continue. Over to KB2IDX. Who else do we have checked in? And go ahead, Chris.
Alrighty, let's get her caught up. We added AD0NQ into BOC, KO6, AQP, K0GIO, WA2, NYY, NW3, KDB, bringing us to 44. I have to say that KDB very carefully. Easy to go the other way. Correct. Sorry. At any rate, I did post a couple of things in the Ham Live chat room about NXDN. Just a little research. And you know that we have Uniden scanners can receive NXDN. Unfortunately, they made it so that you had to pay extra to upgrade it to do that. But Bucky, that's a question for you. I don't know. Maybe from my scanning days is where I have this. But somewhere I have NXDN associated with the railroad. Is it possible railroad used NXDN at some point? The KB2IDX, back to you, Bucky.
You know, I think you're right. And I wish Jimmy was here, N7VDR. He retired a couple of years ago, and he worked for the railroad for several years. He was a train engineer, and he would tell you for sure what kind of radios they used. But I think you're right. They used NXDN. Private businesses used NXDN. You can get set up from Kenwood, complete with your own commercial repeater and NXDN radios. But then again, now ham radio can use it too. And I think that's interesting. So yeah, there were several systems that used NXDN. Anybody have any comments on that? Anybody know about NXDN in the commercial world? Anybody use NXDN? Come on in with your call sign.
Yeah, ZL2BZ with a comment regarding NXDN. Thanks, Bucky.
Hey, I'm glad you're there. I know you know about this stuff as well. You and I have talked about a lot of this stuff before, And we just added N0KU, Tom, and we added Steve or KA1CNF, by the way. Now we've got 46, and over to Paul in New Zealand, ZL2 Bravo Echo Zulu. Go ahead and take it.
Yeah, hi there, Bucky, and everybody on the net. Yes, so while my experience is not directly with NXDN, but I know that when I was doing some radio refresh, some FM radio refresh for the National Park Service in New Zealand, that there was an area where they had to go and work with people with NXDN repeaters. And what was interesting was that the NXDN repeaters could actually talk both FM and NXDN at the same time. And all you needed was a CTCSS tone on your FM radio to make it work, and the frequency, of course. So that's my experience with NXDN. Over.
All right. Have you ever owned an NXDN radio?
Yeah, W0SUN ZL2BZ. No, I've never owned the NXDN radio. I have used NXDN using DroidStar, but that's not a that's about as close as I get. Over.
So, what I do, my favorite mode of, let me see here. My favorite way to get on NXDN, honestly, if you use an early version of BlueDV for Windows with an Ambi chip, it had DMR D-Star Infusion. But the most recent version of BlueDV, they added NXDN. When they added NXDN, even though I've used an OpenSpot, my favorite way of accessing NXDN is through my BlueDV and an Ambi chip. That's actually where I go to connect to NXDN reflectors. And I don't know, there's a little bit of traffic, but it is not the most popular mode, I can tell you that. Over to you, Paul.
Roger, Bucky, that's right. Yes, it's not the most popular mode. Of course, the second-hand NXDN equipment is flowing out from various commercial interests, so that's a way of picking up a radio with NXDN. I know that quite a few guys I've found out that have got second-hand NXDN radios, and they operate them through their hotspots. But yes, it's not as popular, even though I think it was basically a commercial system that got beaten to the punch by other modes, and unfortunately, it's become a little bit an orphan mode, really, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, back to you, Bucky. W0SUN ZL2BZ, over.
Yeah, my favorite reflector is Pi-Star Chat. I like to come in on NXDN just because I can. And when I do that, you'll see me on Module G, XLX 303 Golf. And Chris and I get on there. Other people, I've seen other people on there. Sometimes people come in on that Pi-Star Chat through other means on Brandmeister, Talkgroup 31672. You can get on a Fusion Reflector. You can get on XLX 672. You can even come on XLX 303 Golf, right? But I like to get on NXDN on that reflector just because it's different. So that's my favorite NXDN reflector. All right, I'm going to move on to another mode. And Paul, while I got you on the radio, I'm going to come up with, go to P25. But I'm going to ask you a question here in just a bit, so stand by. Let me reset. Okay, the way I'm approaching these modes is chronologically. So I'm going from D-Star, then NXDN, and then P25. So P25 really began as a mode known as APCO-25 way back in the 1980s. Somebody was trying to, and I'm not going to really go into, I don't even know what APCO means. I guess I could research a little bit more, but I don't want to take too much time on that. But it really didn't do anything until an event happened, and it really took off. I'm going to see if Paul can take this. What really started the adoption of P25 in the public sector? Over to Paul.
Yeah, Roger, Bucky. I think it's probably its use by the emergency services and a certain manufacturer who pushed it very heavily in North America, over.
Yep, that is correct. But I can tell you what really, when I first started, P25 really took off in 2001. And what really kicked it off was 9/11. So the World Trade Center attacks on September 11th, 2001, what happened there is several agencies responded. Different fire departments, police, emergency services, and they found out that they could not communicate with each other. And that was a big problem. And that slowed down and pretty much caused a lot of it was really sad because they could not communicate. One agency could not communicate to another because the radios were not compatible. So that was really sad. So after that, FEMA and several agencies received federal grants with developing P25. And the first standard of P25 was phase 1. And let me talk to you. Well, let's see. Paul, tell me a little bit about phase 1 and phase 2. I'm going to let you talk for a little bit.
Yeah, Roger, Bucky. W0SUNZL2BZ. Yeah, phase 1 was was actually a very good mode, actually. I was involved with the New Zealand Police when they installed their phase 1 network. They're in the stages of doing a phase 2 network now, but this was many years ago. Anyway, phase 1 basically used basically a full frequency FSK type mode, which basically got its origins out of the APCO 25, and it was very good. It was mainly used by a lot of services use trunking, of course, and also conventional modes. So it's all good stuff. But phase 2 of P25 is a time division multiplex mode, similar in its technology to DMR, but using a different systems. Anyway, that's my explanation, and hopefully that's adequate for you, Bucky. Anyway, you can add anything else you know about the North American experience, over.
All right, real good. Thank you, Paul. Now, I'm going to ask a question out there, and I wish I could ask a raise of hands, and I guess I can in the chat room, but anybody out there want to come forward let me hear your call sign if you own a P25 radio. If you own a P25 radio, come on in with your call sign if you'd like to volunteer.
Yeah, Zulu Lima 2 Bravo Echo. Zulu owns a P25 radio.
All right, perfect. And I'm lucky me, next month, in about 2 weeks, I get to go to Dayton, Ohio, the big hamvention in the USA. And I am shopping for a P25 radio. Now, let me ask you, Paul, do you own a phase 1 or a phase 2, which is TDMA, time slot 1, time slot 2, or do you use the original phase or frequency key modulation, and why do you use, which mode do you have and why? So I'm going to ask you that question since I got you on the air. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, W0SUN ZL2BZ. Well, the radio I've got uses phase 1 P25. Unfortunately, phase 2 P25 is a fairly recent implementation and not available in the surplus market, unfortunately, at the moment. But there are quite a lot of P25 phase 1 radios that are available in the commercial market, in the surplus market. I know that a lot of organisations are making their surplus equipment available, and in fact I remember listening to some some hams in the United States saying that they were starting to see P25 radios coming up in ham sales and boot sales, car boot sales and things like that. So phase 1 is probably the best option to go for because it's nice and simple. It doesn't you don't have to do anything with fancy time slots. And it's probably the easiest one to get going, over.
Okay, very good. So I've asked questions from other hams that own a P25 radio, and 100% of the time, it's phase 1. I know that we have a trunk system here in Denver, although I don't know much about it, but in Utah, they're also developing a P25 phase 1 trunk system, and they have a P25 phase 1 repeater. Now, 100% of the time is phase 1 in ham radio. And the reason why is good luck affording, good luck paying for a P25 phase 2 radio. And if you do, you'll probably not be using ham radio. It's very, very expensive for a P25 phase 2 radio. That's why 100% of the time in my research, it's always phase 1, and it's actually using C4FM voice-wide technology, 12.5 kilohertz. Phase 1 actually uses C4FM. It's not compatible with C4FM Yaesu, and I'll go into that a little bit. But P25 phase 1. And so the reason why is all these agencies are going P25 phase 2. If you look it up on, repeater list, or you go to the repeater to look up repeaters in the world, USA, you go to their radio reference, you go there and look up P25, you're going to get a lot of information. They have a lot of information about P25. Somebody should look up, repeater book. So somebody should look up P25 on there while I'm talking. I don't have time, but you're going to find a lot of information, and you're going to find P25 phase 1. Well, let me reset. Now, there are a lot of agencies in Colorado that still use P25. Well, there's one main system that uses phase 1, but they're starting to go to phase 2. Now, if you have phase 2, it's still compatible with phase 1. You can still go back to phase 1. Most of those, that's why they're so expensive. That's one of the reasons. So P25, you have to go back to, they call it duplex mode, or go back to phase 1. It's time slot 1, time slot 2. You cannot use time slot 1 and 2 on phase 1. It's just it's not going to happen. So you can switch back and forth if you have a phase 2 radio. So the reason is, as you adopt and integrate phase 25 or P25 phase 2 in your system, a lot of times agencies are still using P25 phase 1. And the whole purpose of P25 is you want agencies to interact with each other and be compatible with each other. So that is why public sector, fire departments, police departments are heavily going to P25. And as they merge into, and as they adopt P25 phase 2, they're ditching their old phase 1, and they're becoming readily available on eBay and SwapFest, and so they're everywhere. You can get a P25 radio for $100, $200, and P25 phase 2 radios cost $3,000. You're not going to be able to afford it, and you're not even going to be able to use it on ham radio. So I just wanted to talk about that. P25, I really want to get one and start using P25, and I believe you can, Paul, can you use it with Pi-Star? Is P25 available on Pi-Star? I think it is.
Yes, Bucky, that's right. Yes, the Pi-Star. Let's have a look at Pi-Star. We'll have a look at Pi-Star and look at it in the configuration, and I think you'll find that, yeah, there we go. We've got P25 as one of the modes. Yes, we've got D-Star M17, YSF, P25. Yep, that's good. And you've also you've got YSF to P25 in there as well, which is interesting, but not DMR to P25. So that's interesting. Anyway, P25 is available on Pi-Star as well as on WPSD. I'll just check WPSD while I'm here. Let's go to configuration and let's have a look here. Yep, it's there as well. So P25 is available if you're using a WPSD or you're using Pi-Star, over.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for looking for me. That really helps me. So, hey, thanks a lot, Paul, for your input there. I really appreciate it. I love calling on you. You know a lot about this stuff. All right, so that's all I'm going to talk about with P25. Oh, one more thing. I gotta mention this. Yaesu, or their parent company, Vertex at the time. Now they've since switched it up. So that's a whole nother thing. If you go in the history of Yaesu, at the time it was Vertex. Now it might be something else, but Vertex was operating and working with Motorola. So they were working on P25 phase 1, and it was C4FM. Now, when Yaesu adopted C4FM as their technology, that's the reason why, is they were working on that technology with Motorola. But since then, they both split, and Motorola also was using phase 1 P25 C4FM. But they decided to go time slot 1, time slot 2. But Yaesu continued working on C4FM, and they now adopted it as System Fusion. So that's where the root is on C4FM technology. Now, P25 phase 1, hotspots, OpenSpot, Yaesu, they all use C4FM. So C4FM is used not just with Yaesu, but other systems as well. But again, like I said, P25 phase 1 is not compatible. You cannot communicate with a fusion radio, even though they both use C4FM. It's a different modulation system. And I can show you that here in just a minute. Okay, let's talk about System Fusion. Came out in 2013, System Fusion 1 by Yaesu. It utilizes 12.5 kilohertz. It uses the common frequency shifting technology, FSK technology, and it has speeds of 9,600 bits per second. Now, that's what I'm talking about. On UHF, VHF, you're going to get high speeds with data transmission, not only voice, but also data, especially using digital narrow at 9,600 bits per second. When you take that down to the lower bands like 10 meters, you're not going to get that 9,600 bits per second. And the lower you go, if you try to use it on, 10 meters, it's okay. If you use it on, like 18, 17 meters or 20 meters, or the lower you go in the bands, you're not going to get that bit rate. It's going to be horrible, and that's why you cannot do digital modes with a digital voice on the lower bands. And really, 10 meters is the limit. You can try and use it, but it's not going to work too well. So that is why 10 meters is pretty much it. All right, let me reset.
NT60X, repeat that, please.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Yeah, so the reason, so there is the 991A. You can use C4FM on 10 meters. In fact, there's a frequency at 29.250 megahertz. 29.250 megahertz in the FM band. And there's a group that does beaconing with group monitoring, and they also talk on that band. Now, the conditions have to be really good, but if you're lucky enough, there's people that have tried to do beaconing and not been successful. But back east, it's a little bit more common, and if the conditions are right, you're going to pick up other call signs for group monitoring. So 10 meters is pretty much the limit. So if you're doing UHF, VHF, you get a higher bit rate of 9,600 bits per second. The lower you go, that bit rate gets reduced. So 6 meters, you're going to get a certain baud rate, or bits per second, I should say. At 10 meters, it's going to go lower. And the lower you go, the bit rate diminishes and goes lower and lower. So you can try it, but you're not going to be very successful on exchanging digital information or digital voice. So, and in fact, the FCC kind of puts a limit in the USA of what bit rates you can use on which bands. And I don't know much more about it than that, but I do know that you're going to get reduced communication the lower you go.
Great, thanks, Bucky. NT60X.
Yeah, so people have asked me that before. Now, Yaesu and Chris, you can put the model number and maybe a URL in the chat room. I'm going to let you do that while I talk about it. Yaesu just released, or they just announced, or back last year actually, in 2024, they announced a new low power rig that does all modes. The 991A has been out for quite a while, and that uses all modes. That means that it does sideband, it does FM, it does AM, it does CW, and it does C4FM. So it's an all-mode transceiver up to 100 watts. But if you go to hamradio.com now, Chris put a link in there. They just announced the Yaesu, or last year they announced the Yaesu FTX-1F low power rig. So now they got two radios that does all mode. Hey, really quick, Chris, I'm going to let you talk about that new radio that does C4FM on 10 meters while we're talking about it. And I'm going to take a quick break, get a drink, and find some other information that I want to post. So over to you. Let me know what call signs we have, and I'm going to let you talk about that new Yaesu rig.
Okay, I'll catch up the chat room in a second. The rig is, some people are making it sound like it's similar to the ICOM IC705, in that it's a QRP rig, and it does Fusion instead of D-Star, but that would also put it in a lower price point, which I don't think is going to happen. I think this is going to be somewhere between $1,000 and $1,500. I have to say. Anyway, but the one thing that some people are not liking, QRP, buy an amp. I think that the idea of it is great because it has I think it has a battery built in, and you can add an extra battery. And I think, I don't know whether it's built in or an add-on, but the antenna tuner is also going to be available. And it just looks pretty. You know, it's got a bigger screen than the 500s. We'll include them all in one, but it's very similar with a big knob and really nice technology. It's a pretty radio if you haven't seen one. I have anxiety about its release, believe it or not, because it's a really fascinating radio. But it'll come, and I'm pretty sure that we're going to see it at the Hamvention. And all right, let me reset, and we just got a couple other names. Okay, we just added Todd and Dan. That's KF0OTF and N1UKJ. We're all caught up. Yeah, okay. Today on Facebook, the Yaesu, official Yaesu Facebook page announced that on John Crooks, I guess it's monthly YouTube / podcast, we'll be talking about the FTX-1F in particular. So another hint that we're getting closer after the one a couple of weeks ago now, where it was last Monday, where he posted just a picture of it, doesn't say anything. got everybody thinking about it. So anyway, I haven't watched his YouTube since maybe I will now. There it is. What a pretty looking radio. Man. Back to you, Bucky. KV2IDX.
All right, real good. Real good. Thank you. I jumped ahead and went on Fusion because that was kind of like an extension of P25, sort of. So P25 Phase 1 uses the same frequency key modulation. P25 Phase 2 uses time slot 1 and time slot 2. Of course, if I ask you a question, what other mode uses time slot 1 and time slot 2? And competing technologies in the commercial world, especially a while back, if I did a search on Radio Reference and I did a search on commercial band radios, now I loved it in the early days when everybody used FM and I could scan. I loved it when you could pick up a scanner and just back in the 80s or even the 70s with crystal controlled scanners. You could buy crystals for each frequency that you wanted to listen to. And pre-internet, now in the 80s it was great because they started coming out with better technology. Even in the 90s, I could get a scanner from Radio Shack and I could scan all the public bands, and it was great. And then they all went digital, and that was a drag, so I had to buy a more expensive scanner, but I did. And I could hear all the traffic. I could hear Denver police, all the ambulances. It was great. And then Denver police went encrypted, and they went P25, they went trunk system, and so scanning just really died. So I don't even have a scanner in my truck anymore. I used to, but not anymore. So, and then I started looking up, when I was looking up all the frequencies to look up scanning on Radio Reference, I noticed that everybody was going either DMR or P25. And as they progressed, they went more and more adopting P25. P25, man, everybody was going P25. And I didn't really know what P25 was, but I really thought that was a bummer. And I could no longer listen. All right, let me reset. So as I was phasing out of listening with my scanner, and I was researching, it was pretty much neck and neck. I mean, I used to work at Jefferson County Public Health, and we used DMR radios. I didn't know much about it. My job in IT, and I didn't design the code plug, but my job was to download the code plug to these DMR radios. So they were DMR radios. Now I bet you they've progressed to P25, but back in those days, and I'm talking about 2006, 2007, when I worked at Jefferson County Public Health. So the big thing was we were having exercises on the bird flu, and everybody was using DMR technology, and I didn't know anything about the zones and the channels, and it was all new to me. And I was like, wow, this is not ham radio, but now it is. So as they were competing, DMR was competing with NXDN, and it was competing with P25, but the clear winner in the public sector is P25. As I look on Radio Reference right now, P25 is the majority. And back in those days, it was neck and neck. But now, definitely P25 took over. But let me jump over to DMR. As you know, ham radio adopted DMR radios. Motorola was the winner, but then the Chinese clones entered the Chinese clones. Anytone, Wuxun, Baofeng, and then now Alinko, and everybody's adopted DMR. In fact, the number one digital mode in the world is DMR. Let me reset. Oh yeah, Paul. Um, you can get from Ham Radio Outlet or eBay or just look them up on Amazon. You can buy these RTL SDR hardware dongles. I have one, and you can download the software, and you can actually monitor all these different with a SDR radio. And I'm not talking about ham radio. Just anybody can buy these radios and monitor all these different systems, and that's pretty cool. So there's some interesting links being put out there on YouTube in the chat room. So if you're not in our chat room, come and join us on ham.live. All right. So I have limited time. By the way, the after hours chat room is open. You can join us on there. Oh, let's see who. Okay, only 2 of us are on there, but I already opened it. It's going to be started here in about 15 minutes, but let me finish up what I'm talking about. I got 2 other modes to talk about. All right, I'm talking about DMR right now. Okay, so DMR, just like Phase 2, uses time slot 1 and time slot 2. It uses a different type of modulation system. It's not compatible with Phase 2 radios, but that time slot 1 and time slot 2 is so they call it an upgrade. So if you do all the research and look at all the commercial brochures out there, P25 Phase 2 is a huge upgrade because they really talk about the two time slots, and they don't make it a big deal on time. They don't even call it time slot 1, time slot 2. They just call it bandwidth sharing. So their big thing is bandwidth sharing. Huge upgrade, and it's very expensive, but the commercial world doesn't really know much about it, but they are adopting it like crazy. So DMR Tier 1, Tier 2, and all that, I'm not going to talk about that, but you all know a lot about DMR. I'm not going to go into great detail, but it uses an AMBI2 chip. Now, I do have to mention, I put a link in on the AMBI chip. D-Star uses a copyright patented AMBI1 chip. When Motorola was researching with DMR and P25 Phase 2, they went to the same company that produced the AMBI chip, and the company offered the AMBI1 chip, but they turned it down because it was so copyrighted by D-Star. So they required a more open version, and that's what was adopted by Yaesu and DMR with the same chip, and that is why you can do software vocoding, and you can see on the PyStar and WPSD, you can go YSF to DMR and DMR to YSF, and the OpenSpot 2 can also do that. Let me reset before I time out. Okay, so that is why you don't need, that is why DMR, when you do transcoding and you have an XLX multi-protocol reflector and you want to experiment with an XLX reflector and you want to add D-Star, it's more expensive because you have to set up a transcoding server. Now that transcoding server can be on the same Linux computer if you add, and you have to have multiple USB transcoding chips for just doing a stream. So each stream requires 3 chips. Or you can buy the added Northwest Technology Ambi chip. There's 2 different kinds. There's the 3000 and there's the 3003. You have to add the 3003. They're more expensive, and you have to add multiple chips to do the transcoding server. Now, we have one of those transcoding servers, and you have to add, a lot of chips to do the transcoding. So if you do D-Star and DMR and Fusion on an XLX reflector, it's going to be more expensive. But if you just want to experiment and you do not want to do D-Star, or if you have a separate module for D-Star and you have another module for Fusion and DMR, that's great. You can do that. D-Star can only talk to D-Star, and Fusion and DMR can talk to each other with an XLX reflector. But once you mix the two, it's going to be more expensive. Okay, so we've established transcoding can be difficult when you add D-Star. And why is that? Is because they use the MB1 chip, and DMR and Fusion share the MB2 chip. That is why you can do DMR to YSF and YSF to DMR. Now, if you want to do transcoding with YSF to D-Star, you really need to buy an OpenSpot 4 Pro, because the OpenSpot 4 Pro added the extra technology and the extra hardware to do the transcoding. So they can do the software transcoding, but they're the only ones really that can do. There's actually one more, but I forget what that was. But it's not very common. OpenSpot is the cheaper one, and you can buy that so you can do Fusion to D-Star and D-Star to Fusion, but you cannot do that with a Raspberry Pi based hotspot. You have to go with the OpenSpot 4 Pro. All right, that is because it's the bummer of doing transcoding. And if you ever listen to D-Star coming over to YSF or DMR, it sounds very compressed. Number one, they're doing the transcoding. Number two, it's limited bandwidth. It's very compressed. And if you listen on the D-Star side, it doesn't sound so good. So it's a mixed bag. So if you're going to do D-Star to DMR, it just doesn't sound the greatest. And that is why people say, let me just reset. Okay, so when you connect to Wires X and you go into a room like AmericaLink, or you go into Kansas City Wide, they're going to say, I'm not too impressed with Wires X. Why is that? It's because I call it a polluted room. You're bridging into these different modes, and you're really reducing the way Yaesu is designed to work. That is why Yaesu doesn't like bridging per se, but they know it happens all the time. So if you really want to get the full advantage of WiresX and Fusion technology, go into a room that isn't doing bridging, and you're going to get more advantage of how Yaesu meant it to sound. So yeah, it's not going to sound great into these other rooms, but you go into an unpolluted room, and I'm just using that term, but you go into a WiresX room that isn't doing bridging, and you're going to sound the way Yaesu meant it to sound. So that's Yaesu's argument right there. All right. Also, you can go into voice wide mode and use more bandwidth for voice technology, and you can limit the digital. All right, so we're not going to talk about that much longer. Okay, so that's DMR. Let me move on to the last mode. Okay, somebody in the chat room was talking about WPSD has a list of reflectors. In fact, Chip has established, I call it the mother of all lists. I really like this list. You can get it on w0chp.radio/digital-radio-list. And I'll repeat that later on, but I posted it in the chat room. This list is a fantastic list. It's got all the modes and all the places you can go on WPSD and Pi-Star. It's got QuadNet, it's got DMR Plus, it's got FCS, it's got YSF, it's got M17, it's got NXDN. So it's got, if you want to examine what the reflectors look like and what you can get on, go to that list. TGIF, YSF, it's got everything. XLX, it's got everything. So I love that list. All right. Let me reset and talk about M17. Lately, I've been getting a ton, well, not a ton. I've been getting more than usual inquiries about M17. M17 has really come a long way from the early days. And let me talk about, let's see, let me get into my place where I was going to talk about this. Hold on, what is it? Okay. When did M17, oh, let's see, where is it come? Okay. So, okay, M17 was started in 2019. It came rather late, and it came out of Poland. I'm not going to go really detailed into M17 history, but 2019, that's when it gets started. And the whole purpose of M17 is to have a non-proprietary open standard, which makes this really in the tradition of ham radio. Ham radio, when my dad introduced me to ham radio in the 60s, and I was like really young. I was 6 years old, 7 years old. In the 70s, I finally got my license at 16 as a novice class in 1978. But my dad was very much homebrew. He was an electrical engineer. He had all the scopes. He had all the equipment. And he did a couple of Heathkit transceivers. He did a Heathkit general coverage receiver, and I got to put that in my room, and I got to use that radio. I was very excited. So here's the cool thing about M17. I like to call M17 the new age, modern era homebrew mode. You can and you can go to town with you can design your own. There are so many projects out there that you can get on M17. You can design your own thing with M17. It's all out there on GitHub, and you can go to town. Now, they have the first commercial radio, and Vail W0KVZ has one. It's called the CS7000 model for $200. Well, no. How much? It's about $300. If you pay $500, you can get the Deluxe Plus model, and you can do DMR, and you can do M17, and do both, and FM. You can go 3 modes on the Plus model, or you can get the $200 less model and just go DMR. So you actually can download DMR, or you can download M17. And it's very simple, it's very cool, And we'll talk about that actually tomorrow on KC Wide. We have a special net tomorrow all about M17. We're going to dedicate the entire net on M17 tomorrow on America KC Wide. Let me reset. Okay, the really cool thing about M17 is it uses a software codec. Unlike the Ambi chip, it uses a codec called Codec 2. And it's out there in open source technology. It's all open. People can tap into it. They can enhance it. It's open source. The whole M17 project is open source. And you can go to that mother of all lists and click on M17 and look at all the M17 reflectors out there. You can buy an M17 radio. You can actually talk on Pi-Star and WPSD. I don't think OpenSpot does it yet, but Raspberry Pi-based Hotspot does M17. Now, you can't transcode. You can't go YSF to DMR, or I mean YSF to M17. You can't go M17 to YSF, but you can buy an M17 radio and use it on your hotspot. And there's actually repeaters out there that are starting to come out on M17. And I really think this is just the beginning. Well, it's been since 2019, but it's going to start taking off. I plan on getting a Baofeng DM1701 radio. I'm going to have a set of them. My first radio is going to be using OpenGD77. This is a project that I want to do. My second Baofeng DMR, or my Baofeng DM1701 radio is going to be using M17, but it's going to require some hardware upgrades, and it's going to be a project that I have to do myself. I plan on finding, now I'm very limited on soldering right now because my left hand is a little bit disabled, so I can't hold the soldering iron like I used to, but I'm going to team up with somebody out there that can do soldering, and I'm going to see if they'll help me convert my Baofeng radio into an M17 radio, because I really want to have a set of two radios that look similar but do different things. So that's my project. Okay, I'm going to put one last diagram into the chat room here, and I'll do that here in a little bit. But please tune in tomorrow if you're interested in M17. KC Wide has an M17 reflector that they just added, and we're going to have a special guest talk about M17 tomorrow. And we got plans here on XLX303. We're going to probably add an M17 reflector in the near future. And it's going to be great because we're hoping to add and contribute to the M17 movement. And it's because it's so open source and it's the new age homebrew system out there.